for joining us tonight for Beyond Graduation Research and Reference Resources presented by Andrew Beman Cavallaro. Um, so if you do not know Andrew, he is our subject liaison librarian with USF Libraries. So if you ever need help in your courses with research or anything like that, he is the person you reach out to. He's a great resource. I'm gonna go ahead and, oh, he put his email in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and let him introduce himself and then get started with the presentation.
All right, it was great to see everybody. So thanks so much. It's a nice group that we've got here as well. And if you're watching the recording later on, hopefully we'll get a chance to connect as well. But yeah, so I'm Andrew Beman. I am one of the faculty research librarians here at USF. I'm based on the Tampa campus, but I am the librarian for the School of Information for Anthropology, and I'm one of the librarians that works with the School of Interdisciplinary Global Studies. I've also worked with sociology and interdisciplinary sciences. And social work, and was even the women and gender studies librarian for a couple semesters back in the day. But so, yeah, I am the liaison librarian for the library science program. I'm also faculty in the School of Information, like Professor Long, and I do teach from time to time. As a matter of fact, I think I might actually have a student or two who was with me in the past here. So good to see you. But so yeah, so basically, kind of what we're going to take a look at today, and it's going to be a fairly informal thing. And I know we're recording it, but if folks feel comfortable engaging in a conversation, I've got some resources, some tools, some methods that are hopefully going to be helpful for folks when they're not at USF anymore. If they're still interested in doing research, and we might not necessarily have the same access to the proprietary resources that we had while we were here, but also a kind of sort of tasting menu of some resources that might be useful when doing open access reference work. At USF, I'm a librarian here. We've got like 1,500 databases to which we subscribe. Previous to this, just to give you just a quick little bit of background, my bachelor's degree is in geography from Florida State, human geography. I've got a focus in anthropology and international affairs, did the master's in library information science at USF from 05 to 08. And then I worked at USF libraries in various staff roles from 05 to 2010. And then I was a public librarian in Polk County. The Bartow Public Library. I was a reference librarian for a few years. And then I was a library director for Pasco Hernando State College for 10 years, and then came back to USF as a faculty member in 2022. I also do human dynamics research for the Department of Defense as a separate research work piece as well. So when I went out to the public library, we had access to a few databases that were proprietary, but the majority of the stuff that we worked with was open access, and a lot of the questions that we had were very open access. So this is kind of like a two-part thing where I want to showcase some stuff that we have at USF that you can still use after you graduate, and then also some research resources that if you want to continue to do your own research and publish, and you're not necessarily tied to an academic institution that has a lot of access to stuff like that, there are ways of doing that. And then kind of the third bit is talking about some resources that I think might be useful when doing like reference work, when you don't necessarily have a large series of databases at your disposal. That kind of third one is kind of a big area to cover because it could be any topic, any question that anybody has. So what I'd like to do too is, for folks who are in the meeting with us, as we go along, I'd love this to be a little bit conversational, because I'd love to hear about resources that you come across. One of the great things that I think is really wonderful about students in the library science program now, as opposed to maybe when I was doing the program, is we have so many more students that currently work in libraries. When I was in the program, there was a very, very small minority of students that also worked in libraries while they were going. So the students bring in so much practitioner knowledge and experience into the conversation that I always relish that chance. So even if you don't work in libraries, being a library science grad student also shifts how you're a patron. So even though you're a patron in a library, you're perceiving things in a way that standard patrons aren't necessarily thinking about. So I'm very happy as we go through, if I'm showcasing some of these resources, if it's like, hey, that's great, Andrew, but I've also played around with this and had great success, or I've got questions about something that we're talking about. I would love to hear the input, or put it in the chat. I do have a slide deck, and then I'll see if I can add the slide deck into the chat when we're done with the presentation. So when folks come back to the presentation, the chat should be there as a repository of any of the resources, but should also hopefully have the slides in it. I can also share them with Brooke too to make sure we get them out to where they need to go. But anybody have any questions to start off with? Anybody in the room got anything that they want to bring up or ask or anything? I can kind of launch into it, but I figured I want to create some space. Oh, I can upload them into the Canvas course, I think too. Okay. Out of curiosity, just from a show of hands for the folks that we have with us in the room, who here works in a library currently? All right, we got a couple of folks. Mary, where do you, if you'd rather not, because we're on camera, that's fine. But if you're comfortable sharing, what type of library do you work in?
So I work in a public library in our youth services department.
Okay, great. That's great. And what kind of work do you do in that environment?
Pretty much everything and anything that they ask me to do. So it could be making displays, making promotional flyers, working on programs, and of course at the desk answering any questions that our kiddos have.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Brooke, your hand was up.
Yeah. Yes. So I also work in the youth department of a public library.
That's cool. And is your load kind of similar to what Mary was describing?
Yes. Although I think honestly, Mary does a broader range of tasks than me.
Okay, cool.
Just based on how our systems are. I think she has more programming experience and stuff, which I get to do a little bit of, but I think Mary has some more responsibility
Okay,
for
great.
that.
And I see Madison doing some typing. I'll wait to see when that comes up, and then yeah, we'll go ahead and move into it. I'll share my screen. I'm on one screen right now, so I can imagine. Oh, excuse me. And Madison says, "Oh, okay. I work in Pasco County as a circulation supervisor. Okay, so you've got a supervisor role. That's awesome. That's awesome. I've had close ties. Like I said, I was in the Pasco Hernando State College, so I was in the Spring Hill campus and the Wesley Chapel campus during those 10 years. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen, and then I'll be kind of going into the live environment with some of these things. Some of these are probably some tools and resources we've seen before, but maybe there's some features about them that might be new to us. But I will ask if somebody could monitor the chat for me and just sing out if folks put in questions or observations, because it might be a little tricky for me to see that while I'm sharing my screen. I really don't want to miss anybody. So let me share my screen really quickly. We're gonna have a quick picture-in-picture here. All right. Okay, so is everybody seeing my the beginnings of my slides here?
I see it.
Okay, great. I'm seeing some thumbs up. All right. So again, the most important thing out of all this too is I did drop my email address into the chat. So again, if you're currently a student and you've got questions about curriculum research as a student as a graduate student in the program, feel free to reach out. But also I like to tell folks I love to talk shop. So if you want to talk about the practitioner, the practical environment, if you've got questions, I've worked with former students of mine and courses that I taught and folks that I worked with elsewhere in the library science program as they've gone through their career, as they've gone on and gotten other jobs. So if I can help connect you with people and resources and things like that, please feel free to let me know. But when it comes to research, of course, what's important is research is all about what you want to say. When we talk about original research, it's us filling in gaps. It's us identifying shortcomings, gaps in the literature, and then wanting to have our own education and practitioner experience, but our own voice as part of what fills that in. So as far as open access stuff, kind of to start with, a couple of the really basic areas to talk about that you still get access to through USF libraries is looking at the catalog. Now, what'll happen is when you graduate, you won't necessarily have access. Like if I do a search and I get all my list of journal articles, you're not necessarily going to be able to open up the journal articles that are there, but you'll still be able to search for material. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll kind of do a combination where they'll do a search in the catalog and they'll see USF has access to this article, this resource, this book, whatever. And then a lot of times what people can do is through their own local libraries, put in interlibrary loan requests. And that's a really old school way of doing open access research, but it's incredibly effective. Our interlibrary loan networks across the country are pretty expansive. So I do like to let people know that if you're searching for material, maybe you can't necessarily access it like directly from a database from USF, but you can still search to see what we have, find what you want, and then go through your public library, your local library to see if you can get it. One of the other things that's really handy too is under our site menu, we still have all of our subject and course guides. Now, I'm sure at some point our students here have been in a class where they're making a LibGuide. They're making a research guide of some kind. Now, this is the guides are openly available. Anybody can go in and search through them. If we were to try to go into the databases, it would ask us to log in, which we wouldn't necessarily be able to do. But as librarians, one of the things that's important is you don't always have to reinvent the wheel when you create a resource. So if you go out there as a librarian and you're making guides, LibGuides, research guides, look to see what other institutions have. And it's a nice professional tool to see, okay, if I need to make a guide about some kind of educational resource or some kind of collection of materials or some sort of process, remember that you can still come back to the USF guides and look at them as examples. If they're ones that you're familiar with and you want to base your new work off of that. Again, it's not necessarily that the databases are going to be something you can use, but the guide itself can still be a template for you when you need to go ahead and do that same work yourself. Another thing I like to point out too is ask a librarian. You do not have to be a USF affiliate necessarily to use Ask a Librarian. And I do that oftentimes. That's a thing. If you're a librarian and you've got a question that a patron is asking you and you need to network to somewhere else, sometimes you get questions about other library systems, or that a colleague might have, or another library has information about that particular resource or that particular question. I've gone on to other libraries' Ask a Librarian page and just chatted with them to get answers to questions. That was allowing me to help patrons that were part of questions and processes and resources that I didn't necessarily have. So it's important to remember that there's always still the ability, whether you're doing it as a patron or whether you're doing it as a librarian trying to reach out to other colleagues, using other folks' open access Ask a Librarian pages is a really, really good tool to still be able to get access to and utilize. In our databases as well, there is also the option to narrow it down by some content that is open access. So for instance, if we're on our main database list, we'll go to the A to Z list in a second. Of course, we have some of our greatest hits right here. But if I go to the A to Z list, get Diego in here. I see we've got 1,500, but I can type in open access. And we have 23 databases that are integrated in with our collections that are open access resources that people can still use. So I'll show you in a moment. Has anybody here heard of the Florida Electronic Library? Is that a collection we've heard of before? Okay, I don't see, it might be hands or there might be something in the chat. I don't see anything, but I'll show you that in a minute, but the Florida Electronic Library is actually a collection of research databases, research database resources that are paid for by the state of Florida Library and available to the general public. But they're also really great for people who are professional researchers. So at USF, we do have a collection of databases that are open access. The content is not inherently proprietary. Actually, we can see that we have some new ones in. What's nice is a lot of publications are really getting involved with open access research. So a lot more journals and publishing groups are trying to get more access for more content. So sometimes it requires some extra funding on the behalf of the institution or even the authors that are submitting it, but a lot more content is more available. So through USF, these are some of our databases interspersed with our proprietary resources. Let me go back to my slides here and move along. Has anybody here used Special collections, USF, maybe some of the archive stuff. I think yeah, okay, I see a hand up, and I think one of our student colleagues here might have been at one of our events, our in-person archive event that we did with one of our classes. Reason I bring this up is special collections often get portrayed as this very, very academic, very archival, sort of removed style of library as space and resource and service. But special collections are basically a public library, whether they're working with donor relations or people just sign up to make an appointment and go in. Of course, USF libraries are open to the public. You have to sign into the front because the same way the employees and the students have to tap in and out with their ID cards, members of the public can still come in. They just sign in. They just do it manually. But special collections host members of the public all the time. So it's one of the things I like to tell folks that are interested in going into archives and special collections librarianship. Sometimes they think that it's going to be this very focused kind of removed work, but you're actually probably the most closely related to a public librarian in academia in those environments. But that does mean that their content is open access. It's often they're working more to get it more of it digitized. So yeah, so special collections is a thing that is a huge cornerstone of research and representation and voice and history that is still available when you leave. We touched really briefly on interlibrary loan. This is actually a link to USF's interlibrary loan, which unfortunately will not be accessible to folks after they graduate. But it is important to remember too, if there's stuff that we have, feel free to use your interlibrary loan to be able to get access to it. Again, like I said, the library itself is open to members of the public. And really, if people did want to get full access to the databases, they can actually visit the campus and come into the library. So we do actually have public computers set aside for open access, essentially access to all the proprietary databases. But another collection that we have that is, I say we have, but we really have access to it, is our government documents. USF acts as a repository for both state and federal documents. This can be really handy when assisting patrons. If you work in a public library, if you're working on a reference desk, let's say, maybe you're working at another academic institution that doesn't have quite the same amount of resources. A lot of public access information is of course, openly accessible. But we also do have this guide, which is set up specifically for all of our various types of government documents and resources. Some of the other slides that I have some of these resources available. They're listed there as well. But just huge amounts of publicly accessible data gets to be something that I find comes up a lot of times in questions. And it is something that USF has access to. And this is kind of a one-stop shopping place for that. But it is really openly accessible. And it doesn't really make a difference if you're with USF or not. Looking at a couple of other guides that we have, USF really tries to balance itself with both, we recruit faculty and and students globally, nationally, the state level, regionally. It's one of the things that I like is that we have a big focus on both very, very widespread geography, but also very much our local backyard. So we try to be cognizant of that when folks are interacting with some of our resources. So one of the things that I really love is if you have a chance to meet Susan Ariev or Evan Fruhoff, they're two other research and instruction librarians that we have at USF. They're on the Tampa campus. Evan is with our engineering, and Susie is with like education and philosophy. But they actually put together an open access research guide. So this was specifically designed for folks who were going to be kind of wrapping their time up at USF, who wanted to still do research. So a lot of times when I'm talking with folks who are last semester graduate students, 4,000 level, fourth year students, first to second semester, fourth year students, and we're kind of talking about the goals for the future. This guide is fantastic, and it talks about a large amount of open access journal repositories, literature materials, If we're looking at open access journals, we have a whole guide, a whole directory rather, of journals that publish that don't require a login. And some of the other tools that I like in here are also very citizenry, very social focused for folks that are not necessarily part of the university environment, but want to be able to get access to some powerful resources. So these can be things to consider for both your own research, if you want to go down that road, or if you're working with patrons that are interested in doing that. When I was a public librarian, we came across people who were very proactive dual enrollment students, or very proactive undergrads at maybe the local college, or patrons who were just interested in expanding their knowledge and getting a little bit more in depth with some resources with some more teeth. So these can be good for y'all, but they can also be good to share with other colleagues and patrons in your respective library environments. One of the things that really helped me in my career, because of course I was a public librarian, then went to the college and the university route, was the fact that I did research even when it wasn't necessarily part of my job requirement. So I was writing articles when I was a staff member at USF before I even left. I was writing articles as a library director in the community college, in the state college. Those were things that I was interested in doing. I wanted to contribute to the scholarly conversation. And I'm glad that I did that, because I wasn't really planning on becoming a university librarian. When I left to go be a public librarian, that's what I thought I was going to do. But my career path changed. And when I came to USF, because I had some publications and I had some presentations under my belt already, because I was able to use resources like these, it really ended up bolstering my academic career in a way I hadn't really anticipated. So sometimes these kinds of open access resources end up playing a role that's not necessarily foreseen. So I speak with a great deal of confidence this stuff can be really helpful for your career and as a practicing librarian, because without this kind of access, without these kinds of resources, I wouldn't have had the publications and the conference presentations that I had that ended up getting me the foot in the door for my current faculty role. Let me close this out here. Now, there's another option too, regarding let's say we're flipping the script a little bit. Maybe you've gone through and used some of the open access databases. You've used Interlibrary Loan or Ask a Librarian to connect with people and resources, and you wanted to do research still after you left USF. Now you might be looking at where you might want to publish. And this is a conversation that we have with folks here at USF all the time, is if you can publish something in an open access journal, that means that anyone who views that doesn't necessarily have to have a paywall or a subscription. So it makes your work more discoverable. So that's, like a lot of Google Scholar. Back in the day, Google Scholar didn't necessarily have a lot of open access content. You'd search for stuff and then there'd be a paywall. And there's a lot less of that because more places are publishing that way. So if you want to be a part of that, if you're wanting to do research, and you want your stuff to be more accessible, we actually have a whole guide that's open for everybody on how to publish in open access resources, how to use open access resources, but also how to go about looking at doing that kind of research, but also understanding what to look for when you're wanting to publish. Some journals are completely open access and there isn't a fee. There's a small ALA journal that wasn't peer reviewed, but it was called Library Work Life. And I had several articles published with them. So they weren't necessarily tier 1, but they were open access. They were easily discoverable. And I got my foot in the door and gave me the practice to be able to continue to do work from there. So this guide is really good, is if you're really interested in being part of that publishing environment, and you're also interested in being part of that open access environment too. Just from a kind of show of hands here, is there for our colleagues that are with us in the room, are there anybody, is there anybody here who's really interested in doing that? Maybe some of our folks who are leaving. You know, I know we have a few folks graduating. Always curious to see, like, is research something that you're interested in pursuing, you know, after the fact, or is it like I need a break from school and stuff like that right now. I just want to do my job and actually be like a librarian, and then maybe reconsider. I'm always Some people are itching right out of the gate to do it, and other folks are like, "Hey, Andrew, you need to give me some breathing space." I'm just curious if anybody here had any observations on that for themselves.
I'm very interested in publishing, so that's something that this is my second master's. So in my first master's,
Mm,
but I actually came back to school just because I missed publishing and writing and the academic conversation. So
right.
I'm very excited to get back into that.
Very cool.
Previously, I worked at a community college, so we were more focused on conference presentations and less on
Hmm.
publishing. So that was where my focus was.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's great because, of course, and this is just for anybody who doesn't necessarily know that, but that's oftentimes how that process comes along. Is you know you do some of the work, you get enough down, you do a poster presentation, you do a presentation at a conference, then you start meeting other people, and maybe you find another collaborator, or then that sets you up with the framework, and then you go ahead and you can do like the real heavier bit of the research, where then you get into the publishing realm. So that's I was fortunate in my college. It wasn't a requirement, but they were very supportive of it. If you wanted to do it, they didn't look at it as a detract. I mean, you know, as long as you weren't just doing research and not helping the patrons, they were very supportive. Brooklyn, I see you were off mute.
Yes. So I want to be a public librarian. So research isn't necessarily usually like as big of a thing. But I do have a topic that I'm interested in, and I've actually been thinking I need to like I need to set up a consultation with you probably before I graduate, to talk about it. And it's more of like I guess like practical applications. I'm
Hmm.
very interested in like how Florida librarians handle the like extra load of being like emergency workers during hurricanes and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I have looked for things like that like throughout my program, and I haven't like found a lot. Like you
Hmm.
read a lot about resilience, like the resilience of your community and the resilience of your library, but not your resilience as a library worker who has to like man a shelter during very
Yeah.
intense times. Which is like a perspective I'm very interested in.
Yeah, that is interesting. And one of the things that I think is very impressive about that is, one, we know that it's a common thing that affects huge numbers of folks in our profession across large swaths of the country, whether it's a hurricane or some other kind of natural disaster, and whatever that looks like. But it is hard because I do know, as we know, it's like the public librarians don't always have the capacity to do it. They don't always have the time allocated. You know, like as a faculty member, 15% of my job is dedicated to research. So I get time specifically designated to do that. And there's often funding to be able to send you off to national conferences and things like that. So the public library environment has so much to add, but I know that sometimes capacity is just a hard thing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that would
and
definitely be a thing that I would have to do like on the side. That would not be like something I would do like while I was at work, probably.
yeah, and just for the record with folks, I have collaborated with folks in that way, and it's not so much as a liaison librarian, but as an inter-librarian research collaboration. You know, like I said, when I talk about being happy to talk shop, it's not just about what you want to do, you know, when you leave from a practitioner standpoint, but you know, I maintain, I mean, librarianship is a very collaborative environment. I maintain a lot of relationships with folks um, in various library environments because of the collaborations that we've done, which I get to treat as part of my 15%, fortunately, but they also have that drive to do it too. So yeah, so that could definitely be something that goes on. Because of course, also not to forget, there's also the Public Library Association annual biannual conference. It's every 2 years. It's a
Yeah, they're
subset
doing
of.
it this week.
Oh, is it going on this week? Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, because one of the librarians I work with is there, and one of the members of our board is there.
That's
So
great. That's great. And Alicia, is your hand up? Professor Long?
Yeah, I just realized that you weren't seeing the chat. So I just wanted to add
Oh, thank you.
that for those interested in publishing, even if it's not super scholarly like a research article, but it's more of the practitioner's side that you want to write about, I recommend to keep in consideration the journal of FLA, of the Florida Library Association, which is Florida
Mhm.
Libraries. That's a journal that is always looking for people to publish, and if the topics are related to Florida, it's the best way to publish your articles. And they do have some of their articles are peer reviewed if it's more researchy type, or you can choose to not make it peer review and just make an article that is more on the practitioner side, but it's a good venue for publishing.
Yeah, and there's always that conversation in publishing too when we talk about impact. It's like, well, how impactful is it? Well, sometimes if you're writing something, maybe it's not peer reviewed, but if it's going out and being seen by more practicing librarians, that's really making a difference. So that gets into a whole other conversation. But yeah, that
Exactly.
very
Yeah.
yeah. I'm glad that our professor brought that up because yeah, it's not to be diminished that, oh, it's not the Journal of Academic Librarianship or whatever. It's like, no, this stuff has real meaning. That's
And
great.
Andrew, I have a question about interlibrary loan.
Sure.
Can you request articles that are only on microfilm?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you can. So what that happens with us not terribly infrequently. I mean, at USF, we have a gargantuan print bound I'll say semi-archival sets of periodicals. We got lots of stuff on microcard, microfilm, microfiche, and yeah, basically our ILL colleagues are astounding for not only what they bring into the university, but also what they provide to other folks. So if somebody requests something and it's on microfilm, a lot of times it'll get pulled, and we have part of the crew in that area will scan it, digitize it, and email it out.
Okay, because the other day I was actually working like the front, like adult facing desk, and I had a patron come in and he had a scan of an article that his father wrote for a US magazine in the 50s, but it was like cut off. So he was trying to find
Okay.
the complete version of it. And when I looked in all, like I looked in the USF, USF libraries, and we had for that specific magazine, which the name is like escaping me right now, we had a database that had it digitized through the 70s, but his was older than that. And I could see that like somewhere in the USF collection, we had it on microfilm, but I was like, I don't know if I can ILL an
Yeah.
article on microfilm.
Yeah, we should be able to do it. And unfortunately, the only thing that tends to limit from that respect is, of course, the request would have to go in through the local library. So like it would have to be
Yes,
done
yeah. This was like
at
while I
there.
was at
So
work at this place.
right. So as long as the requesting library has a reach big enough to get to, because of course we could say that about University of North Dakota or wherever. If our receiving library has an interlibrary loan scope that's that big, USF though, if USF gets contacted through their system, should be able to take care of that.
Yeah, because our public library uses Flynn Share It, so it's like Florida libraries,
Okay.
and I think USF is part of that. So,
Yeah, that sounds great. That should be
but I
that
was
should be
like,
the
I don't
case.
know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. So I'll tell you what, let's move on to just another aspect here. So we were kind of talking about, what can we do to get resources? What can we access? So we saw some of the open access databases. We saw some of the LibGuides that have open access research and publishing materials. One thing to consider as well, if you're interested in going down that road, is getting a researcher ID or a researcher profile. So like, for instance, at USF, we have a whole like a scholarly commons, like a digital commons. We have a repository, but that also includes, faculty and even student publications. But we also create researcher profiles as well. So like I have a profile with USF that has links to a lot of my publications elsewhere. But there's also things like OrcID or ORCID. Google Scholar is a good thing to do. So for instance, just to show what they look like, these are free. So again, let's see. Here. So what this is, an orc ID is basically like a unit. It's almost like a call number for your career. So this is a profile that you set up, and it gives you a specific number. And if anybody looks that number up, they can see a profile that you've made. Mine has my professional biography, and it also has presentations, articles, grants, professional development work that I've been a part of. So it's basically a way to have a central repository for your own work, both as a practitioner and as a researcher. There's no fee for it. And this can be a really good way to make yourself discoverable. I have my ORCID as part of my email signature. And then there's also, of course, what we all know and love, Google Scholar. And I have a researcher profile with Google Scholar. So I also recommend, those are the two big ones. There are some other ones that you can do, but if you're interested in doing this, these are open access. They're going to be something that you generate, and it'll, Google Scholar will do things like track the number of citations of your work. I have some selected presentations in here. It's mostly my publications. I mean, all my publications are in here, but that's the majority of it. And it kind of tells you where you rank with the various ranking indices and things like that. But as far as if you are going that publishing route, to create an open access account that will make you more discoverable, ORCID and of course Google Scholar are going to be some pretty solid ones to go with. Get back up here. So there's a few other things that I put together that are collections of sort of scholarly academic resources that are openly available to the general public. They're open to any public patron, and they're open to any folks that are interested in doing research but maybe don't have access to USF kind of stuff anymore. Some of these are a bit more local, and some are a lot larger. So, some big ones that we know, we've probably heard of PubMed. Obviously, many of the reports that come from the public sector for like National Institute for Health, NASA, the USGS, EPA, CDC. A lot of that stuff is very, very data driven. The UN's data is incredibly expansive, ranging from every conceivable topic. So I just kind of put some of these together. Again, when we start getting into this realm of open access repositories for the research stuff, it's not too bad, because it's decent, but it's a little limiting. So for instance, the Florida Electronic Library, which is a collection that I really, really like. So this is done by again by the state Library of Florida, and it's got a great bit for its A to Z list. So the same way we had an A to Z list of databases, they have a similar one here. Now, some of these are going to be more subject specific. So there's something here for, Florida projects for kids, Florida information, Florida history. And some of these are really good for folks that work in K-12 environments. If folks, we talked about folks who are doing programming. Maybe you want to pull in some history, you want to pull in some Florida themes. There are great resources in here. And we also do have some of the bigger heavy-hitting databases. So Gale, Gale and EBSCO are the two kind of really big database owners that are out there. And Gale has a partnership with the Florida Electronic Library to make its stuff available. So the state library pays for it. And so we get things like, Academic One file, we get Insights, we get the ebook collection. So these are up there with like the kind of USF level databases that we have. So maybe we don't necessarily have EBSCO, but Gale stuff is really great. What's also nice too is they have sort of information literacy tools for those of us, like I said, that work in K through 12 or maybe work in youth services. These are basically databases that children can interact with. So it's kind of an information literacy teaching tool of, okay, when you get to high school and college, you're going to be getting resources and research resources that are going to be these repositories that you can explore. These are sort of designed at various sort of developmental levels, to introduce folks not only into the material composing those topics, but this type of sort of research, proactive searching environment. So one of the big challenges, of course, people are very passive. They consume information from sources that they connect with, but a lot of times it's when is it that you need to take that first step to find new information that maybe isn't necessarily being presented to you, and these offer a couple of good resources to kind of build some of those skills, and they've got differing levels of complexity and stuff like that. So like I said, for those of us that work with like a K-12 kind of environment, some of these resources are really great, and they break a lot of these databases down by subject. Professor Long.
Yeah, I wanted to add, for those of you who work with youth, that these databases, one of the cool things they have is that the articles usually have a Lexol level of like how the readability of the articles for the different literacy levels of the students or kids. And so a lot of times when you're helping students with homework, that is important. And sometimes even I work with teachers and students who were using these databases, and the teachers will just give them a level that they should be able to understand the content better from that. So that's a really neat tool if you're working with kids to know the Lexol levels. And also when you're working with, for example, English learners that need materials that are on a again language level that is more easy to comprehend for those who are learning English, I would recommend these databases because they explain things with less words and better vocabulary and stuff like that. So they're really good.
That's great. And it's obvious when you say it out loud, but it didn't even occur to me that the ESL factor would be something that's another sort of weight to leverage in this. I just scrolling down, you can see it's not a small amount. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. So for those of us, in Florida, going to be sticking around Florida, this is a great one-stop shopping place. They also have Semantic Scholar is another one that is basically a repository of open access content. So kind of the way Google Scholar will is sort of publisher agnostic. It pulls material in from a wide range. Semantic Scholar tends to work with a lot of journals and publishing companies that do publish things which are proprietary, which you do have to pay for, but sometimes there are agreements with those companies where maybe a certain percentage or a certain part of the collection is made available. So it's sort of we'll give you a little bit of a taste for free, and then when you find that you really like it, then some folks will go ahead and do a full subscription. But Semantic Scholar is a really interesting one. The only thing about Semantic Scholar is I feel like they are decreasing the amount of their stuff that is full text. So the stuff in there is open access, and really the goal for open access is when we do a search, we want to get the full text of the material. But because Semantic Scholar is an open repository and a lot of AI tools utilize the content, there's been a bit more of a, I know crackdown isn't the right word, but I'll say that in the absence of a better vocabulary term, to say you can get all the abstract and the citations and the keywords and subject terms and things like that, but the actual full text for the article is in fact not always available. So then sometimes we have to go through some other route. Maybe we have to go through one of the other repositories that we have, or see if Google Scholar has it, or maybe we do it through Interlibrary Loan. The Library of Congress also has a large number of databases that it provides open access for as well. Can I see all of them? Yeah, so they have this is over 2,000 collections of various materials. Of course, we could do a search and explore more into it. But yeah, the LOC, of course, I mean, really, the Library of Congress is a big public library. So its resources are well curated and openly available. So this can be great for working with public patrons. It can be great with K through 12. It can be great in corporate libraries, special libraries, medical libraries, law libraries. These are a great series of databases as well. And I'll go ahead and just what I like about this one is one of the things that is sometimes hard to find outside of academia are dissertations and theses. Dissertations aren't published in the same way journal articles and in books and traditional kind of standard publications are. So a lot of times you need to get access to a database that has that. So like, we have like ProQuest. USF has the really massive ProQuest dissertations database. But EBSCO has a certain portion of its dissertations, which it makes available too. So, our dissertations are, of course, phenomenal case studies. They have very in-depth methodologies. Their discussion and results sections are amazing. Their literature reviews are gargantuan. But unfortunately, a lot of times, if you aren't part of a university, you don't have access to that kind of database. So the EBSCO Open Dissertations is a great resource for those of us that are doing research and are wanting to get access to that. Also, some of us who maybe we're thinking about maybe going for the next degree. I mean, some people do the master's and they take some time and then they're like, well, you know what? I am going to go for a dissertation. Looking at other people's dissertation or go for a doctorate, looking at other people's dissertations might help navigate where you might want to land with some of that. The last couple things I'm going to showcase, I'm just going to shift gears a little bit. So, of course, if you're doing all this research, one of the things that's super important is, as we all know, we need to make sure that we cite things properly. And one of the things that we do have at USF that is one of our LibGuides, but is also really an open access guide, is our citation guide. So if you need to come back and get refreshers on APA, MLA, Chicago, what have you, a lot of our help on citing sources and going through that, doing literature reviews, doing annotated bibliographies. Of course, literature reviews are a part of some of the assignments that we do as students, but they're also a critical part of any publication that we do. So these pieces of information are, and we actually have a whole guide just on doing literature reviews, are still open. These are not necessarily proprietary. And of course, the content for things like the APA style guide blog is available as well. And the last thing for the researcher side, and then I'll just spend a few minutes just kind of talking about some suggested open access repositories for kind of general reference, is a citation management program. Has anybody here used Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote? At least I'm seeing a thumbs up from somebody. That's good. And
I've used Zotero, not a lot, but just a little bit. I think
okay.
Based off of your recommendation, actually.
All right, great. Yeah, so basically what these programs do is, if you're doing research and if you just need to cite 5 things, you can do that manually without being too hard. There's some citation generation tools built into some of our databases in the Cavallaro. But when you start doing projects that have dozens and dozens or hundreds, depending on the kind of work that you're doing, having a program that will export all that citation information, keep it stored in basically a personal library for you, and then insert it into Word or Google Docs can be really, really helpful. So for instance, I'm not going to go into it right now because we don't have enough time, but Zotero is actually a free program. EndNote and Mendeley we have here because USF pays for the subscription, and being students, obviously you get access to it. But I recommend Zotero a lot of times because once you leave USF, you won't have full access to your EndNote and Mendeley accounts and repositories anymore, but you will with Zotero. So Zotero is basically a place where you create a free account. I recommend using a personal email address with that because your email address at USF will end at a certain point if you leave. But then you can use Zotero. You find your sources, you export the citation information into Zotero. There's actually a plugin that you can download for Word. And while you type, you just hit the Zotero button and you can insert your in-text citation and it can build your works cited page for you as you go automatically. For those of us who are still in the program and still have a bit to go, these are some great resources, especially if I can catch people, who are in the first semester or maybe not fully halfway through yet. These resources can be a massive time saver. But Zotero is one that we can continue to use even after we're not at USF anymore. So the last few slides that I have are a sort of amalgamation, and they're kind of a bit of a smattering. So they're not necessarily put together by a particular category, but I basically put together 3 slides of open access reference resources that I found folks oftentimes are interested in exploring. So a lot of data. So for instance, we have the census data, a lot of occupational help, um, laws, statutes, are things that people ask a lot about. Um, we talk about interlibrary loan, WorldCat, the global library catalog, who has what elsewhere. Looking at things like property records and criminal records, different states, different counties maintain these in different ways. So I had like just the Hillsborough County options in here. If we're looking for old classics, we have Project Gutenberg. Family Search is an open access genealogy tool. It's not quite as powerful as Ancestry, but if somebody's interested in exploring that, if people are looking for primary sources in American history, we have the Digital National Public Library. So a lot of these are a combination of like professional law, property, criminal justice, general esoterica, and literature that are available. We also kind of continued that along. If people are interested in doing their own GIS projects, OpenStreetMap is a really big one. People who are looking for legal help, Cornell's materials are really big on that. They're looking for open access data or obviously online, previous versions of sites. If they need help with navigating court cases, and then financial data, and just if people are looking for data-driven models, a lot of these resources are kind of a little one-stop shopping little grouping. And then the last one that I had on here is for HOAs. And if you're in the public libraries long enough, you're going to be working with folks that do a lot of work with HOAs. And there's lots of rules, lots of regulations, but there's a lot of help for stuff. So I actually have a slide just for open access HOA stuff. Lots of meeting room usage for HOA related activities. The last couple of slides in here are ones that just kind of describe some information literacy that we're familiar with. If we're using things like Bing, we're using things like Google, we're using things like Google Scholar, just some kind of tips and tricks about some of the information architecture, about how that information is ranked, and how it is prioritized and presented between different search engines. Some of the really great things for Google Scholar. Some of the things that are a little tricky. For instance, it doesn't cross-reference special collections. It doesn't necessarily make it clear if they're dissertations, and it's not particularly clear if the resource is peer-reviewed. So a wide variety of stuff, but there are some limitations when using Google Scholar. So just some things to look out for. And of course, a lot of popular AI tools have an open access aspect to it. So knowing a bit about how those tools have their information architecture set up. So for instance, ChatGPT is very obscure about how it's collecting the information. Whereas some of the other tools like, Copilot just uses the Bing search engine. Gemini uses the Google one. The two that I tend to utilize are Claude and Perplexity. Claude utilizes its own search engine called Brave Search, which is kind of like an early version of Google. And what I mean by that is it doesn't hyper customize all of its replies based on its previous history with you. It doesn't use your information to train it. So you're not going to get results that are only going to be geared for you. You're going to get stuff that's more objective. Perplexity is an open access AI search engine that basically, or a search tool that doesn't actually have its own search engine. It doesn't put together an index. It uses internet crawlers to access websites directly from servers. And then we do have a few, let's say, like literature review helpful tools. Elicit is a tool that is a search tool that uses Semantic Scholar to pull in open access content. And help with creating literature reviews. Notebook LM will do that as well. But what you do is if you have the article PDFs or any documents, you upload it to Notebook LM, and then it will help organize your content and give give summaries regarding like topics in across various resources that you upload to it. Elicit was kind of the go-to for that for a while, but it got really expensive recently, whereas Notebook LM is free. And there's also a really good one called Julius that is a really nice data analysis tool. So if you're looking for not so much a generative AI, but a discovery AI. I'm interested in finding information on blank, or I have this data. Help me organize it. These resources are pretty good as well. And again, as being practitioner librarians, we're going to be working with patrons who are going to have questions about these. They're going to have people who are like, well, what's the difference between how Siri and Alexa bring about my material? Well, what's wrong with using Chat GPT versus Claude? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? People who don't want to touch it at all, people who embrace it too much. And of course, we do also have a LibGuide at USF that's part of our AI, basically our AI information literacy. And a lot of this stuff is open access, as a lot of it is very just sort of informative and learning about currently available tools and a lot of the stuff under the hood for what to look out for. So I recommend folks who are going into the field to take a look through some of that, because how people interact with information resources, maybe the information resources themselves aren't really going to change, but the interfaces are changing drastically and quickly. How you would teach information literacy and seeking information through a database 3 years ago is going to be very, very different from how we're going to be doing it in the next couple of years. So that, again, that human information interaction is something that we need to be fluent in. And I'm very happy to talk with you about that. So with that, that puts us at about the hour. So I'll go ahead and kind of sit back and chill. And, if we want to keep the recording going, or if we want to stop it, if folks have questions or comments or anything, observations, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit. But for those of us online, again, my email is in the chat. I'll upload the slides. So I look forward to the future conversations.
Something that I wanted to say regarding special collections, because I know you highlighted the ones that USF has, is that to also remember that places that may be closer to you, depending on where you live, also have special collections. I've been looking at the Ringling College of Art and Design, which is here in Sarasota County, their special collections, because I've been very interested in book art and book binding lately, and they have a good collection for that there. So it could also be good to look, if you are not close to USF physically, to look at what is close to you and what they might have as well.
Thank you. And let's see, is anybody else? Oh, thanks. Yeah. So again, yeah, this can be I'm happy to let people be in the driver's seat from this going forward. If this turns out to be all the information that you need on these kinds of topics, run with it and go. If you're like, hey, Andrew, let's go ahead and set up a consultation. Feel free to email me, and we can go ahead and meet one-on-one or in groups. Or like I said, we want to talk shop. That's great too.
Well, anybody thinks if they have a final question, I'm going to do a quick Solus spiel. So if anybody is graduating, we are planning to do an in-person graduation party on the Tampa campus prior to commencement. That will be in CIS 2028 at 11 a.m. on May 7th, which is the day of commencement, if you are physically going to the campus. We will be publishing more information about that soon for future reference. If you are not graduating, Solus is currently preparing to run elections for our board. So if you're interested in getting more involved, we have information about that up on Bulls Connect and our Canvas page about how you could nominate yourself for a position if you would like. And then finally, for everybody, we will be doing one more educational event this semester. So in April, we will be doing a panel on youth services programming. So watch out for more information about that soon.
All right. And just to reconfirm, Brooke, I'm sorry, you said it was May 7th?
May 7th, yes.
May 7th, okay, great.
Because I think our commencement is at 1:30 on May 7th. So we are doing a graduation party at 11 to kind of hang out for a little bit and then walk over to commencement together. So of course, Andrew, you are welcome to come. and meet
Well,
people in
that's great.
person.
Thanks. I as a faculty member, I get a chance to sign up to attend graduation. They're always looking for faculty members to sit on the stage, and of course, especially during spring, we have so many commencement ceremonies. You do get to a little bit of you get to pick a little bit. So, knowing that, I will try to get my commencement attending date to be that one.
Okay. And also, if you want to come to that, the Bulls Connect event is already up, so you can RSVP there, or you can email us at the Solus email, which is this. I'm going to put it in the chat, just because we are trying to get like a head count before we order food. So, if anybody's interested in that.
And just one last housekeeping item with the presentation. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to upload the slides, but Brooke, I'll email them to you, and then we can get them to wherever they can live.
Yes, I can put them in the Canvas files, and then when I send out an email to be like, the video is here, and I can also be like, the file is here for anyone to reference.
I do actually have a really introductory question that it didn't dawn on me until about halfway through your presentation. How long do we have access to our USF accounts, like email, after we graduate?
Well, I've seen it last a semester.
Okay.
I've seen it. I don't know that I've seen it go much past that. I think it's one of those like, okay, you graduated. I think there's like a semester grace period, and then after that, it's it'll look at the student records for who's no longer currently active.
Gotcha. As you were going through databases, I'm realizing like, oh, I signed up for an Alexander Street profile and an EBSCO profile, and all of them were under my USF email. So I'm like, wonder if I can go in and change those to like a personal email address. I'll lose institutional access, but if I had like watch lists and things like that, they may preserve them. I might not be able to watch them, but I can at least keep the lists and things like that I've curated.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think about it in terms of like Zotero, but that's right. You can create individual accounts with like EBSCO and things like that for your own stuff directly with them. So yeah, that's a good point. I'll remember to bring that up in future.
Yeah, we have like every Shakespeare play you could think of, and many West End plays and musicals and things like that you can access. And so I started to make a Shakespeare list, and I was like, oh, I have no time during the semester to watch these. But there's a lot of really cool resources, and when you build a profile, I've always wondered, is it separate? It has to be tied to the institution so you have access to the database, but I think the profile itself you should still be able to access even without it, if of course you can still access your USF email. So
right, yeah, that should be the case. Yeah.
Also the same thing for any organizations you might be a part of, so like ALA, FLA. I need to start thinking about going in and transferring email addresses.
Yeah, and that's just the last little plug with that too. Obviously ALA is coming up. If you're a student and you can swing it, it's great to be able to get the reduced rate. It's great to be able to get the reduced membership, and it matters. I mean, for very obvious reasons, there aren't a ton of students that necessarily go to the national conference, but when the students show up, it really makes an impact. Like people notice. So yeah, if you get a chance to do that, take advantage of it. And FLA is coming up, that's before I was doing national stuff with USF, I was huge with the Tampa Bay Library Consortium and the Florida Library Association. All of that stuff is relevant. Get involved with it. It's very impactful.
Anyone who can go to FLA, we're also having at every year we have a reception for alumni of the school. So after you graduate, when you go to FLA, make sure to check out where the USF reception is and join us. And this year, the reception is going to be also the Alice G. Smith lecture that our school presents a lecture every year. And we are doing it at FLA on May 13th. So keep that in mind if you can swing by Orlando. Our professor adjunct and library director, Nancy Frederick, will be the speaker on topics of community engagement. So that's pretty exciting. So just plugging it in since you mentioned FLA.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to do a last call for questions before I turn the recording off. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Okay.